You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You with GB News, the top story. The Bank of England has kept interest rates at 5.25%. The bank's governor, Andrew Bailey, saying price rises are slowing faster than expected and should continue to do so. It follows yesterday's better than expected inflation data. But the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, said today, despite the announcement, Britain has been left worse off under the Tories.
I think there will be a sense of relief, particularly for those who are coming up to the end of their mortgage deals. But let's look at where we are in the bigger picture, because somebody coming up to remortgage their house today is looking at paying £220 more a month than they would have done if they had have remortgaged a year ago. So this is still a very challenging time for families and businesses with the cost of living crisis, which continues to bite.
Well, borrowers may start to feel the benefits of the Bank of England's announcement. Shortly after the announcement, Nationwide said it would be cutting the majority of its fixed-rate mortgages. The country's biggest building society will now offer 5- and 10-year fixed-rate mortgages of below 5% for first-time buyers and home buyers. The Prime Minister says hard-pressed families shouldn't have to pay an unaffordable price for the UK to reach net zero. Rishi Sunak says he won't proceed with plans that would punish motorists and working people. But Shadow Minister for Industry and Decarbonisation, Sarah Jones, says the government's plan to roll back some climate policies is the wrong decision. 5 companies have been hit with fines totalling almost £600,000 for making unwanted calls to elderly and vulnerable people. They were found to be pressurising people into buying insurance for household appliances like washing machines and fridges. The Information Commissioner's Office says it's fined 16 companies almost £1.5 million since 2021 for similar instances. And in international news this evening, Volodymyr Zelensky has been meeting with President Biden at the White House. The Ukrainian president is in the United States to garner further backing for the war against Russia. Congress is bitterly divided over a new military aid package, with many Republicans starting to question the high level of support. The US has already sent $113 billion in security and humanitarian aid to the country. And the King has been paying tribute to what he calls the indispensable relationship between the United Kingdom and France on the second day of his state visit there. His Majesty and Queen Camilla spent the afternoon visiting a flower market in the rain with their umbrellas before heading on to Notre Dame Cathedral. Earlier, he became the first British monarch to speak from the Senate chamber in Paris. He celebrated the friendship and warm familiarity between the two nations, as well as unity on issues such as climate change. This is GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to Headliners, your first look at Friday's newspapers. I'm Andrew Doyle. Joining me tonight are two of my very best friends, Josh Howie and Nick Dixon. Why did you laugh at that? You scoffed.
Because someone's written that for you to say and you've never said it ever.
No, I demanded that they put it in the auto cue because I feel that way.
Okay. But the way you said it, it was like forcing my very two of my best.
I enjoy their company.
I will not be treated like this. I love you both dearly. You're like family to me. Right, we're going to have a look at the front pages for Friday. The Daily Mail is leading with Starmer lets cat out of the bag on Brexit betrayal. The Telegraph, Hunt, tax cuts are virtually impossible. The Guardian is running with campaigners plan legal challenges to Sunak's U-turn on green policies. The Mirror, for your eyes only. It's a petition on a spy charge, apparently. The Sun has BBC shame over Flasher brand. And finally, the Daily Star, save our spam. We'll get to that in a moment. Those were your front pages. OK, we're starting apparently with the Daily Mail. Josh. No, Nick, you've got this one, Starmer.
Oh, I thought we were doing financial times. I can do the Mail if you want.
Yes,
Happy
please.
to do it. Happy to do it. Yeah, this is Starmer lets cat out of bag on Brexit betrayal.
Right.
So they've made it sound as if, and there's a picture of the Financial Times.
We've got the wrong paper up there.
Which would you rather do?
We're looking at the Daily Mail first, which is the story about Keir Starmer.
All right, happy to do it. Yep. OK. So this is the moment Keir Starmer is caught on camera saying Labour don't want to diverge from EU rules. They make it sound like he's been caught out like in a dingy hotel or in a sort of bathroom or something. Yeah. But actually, he was on stage at a conference. And so it's not really that secret. There's the headline. It was, he said that, well, he made a mistake first. He said the UK being outside of the UK. I'm not sure how that's going to work. And then he said, obviously, then he's talking about the EU. He said we share values, and the more we share values in the future together, the less the conflict. He said we don't want to diverge. We don't want to lower standards on food, environment, etc. So it's just what everyone knows and suspects. He's going to bring us more and more in line with the EU.
Is he, though? I mean, but,
of course
you know,
he is.
Well, but he was the architect of that people's referendum, the thing that was an utter disaster for Labour. There's no way he's going to walk that back. He's not trying for Brexit by stealth, is he?
They've been very, very clear. Labour said we are not rejoining a single market. We're not rejoining the EU in any way.
Right.
All he's basically saying is, essentially, these guys, they're our biggest trading bloc. They're right next to us, and we don't want to lower standards. And the Tories haven't. The Tories, as they say here, if the Tories have plans to lower working standards for people or environmental standards or whatever it is, actually that one they did do. But the point is, we want to trade with these people.
Well, just ultimately, I think, just in purely self-interested terms, why would he go back on that? Because it would be.
He's being filmed. It's not. It's like, as Nick says.
You don't trust him, Nick. Is that the thing?
Of course not. Whether it's Starmer or whether it's someone like, look, Labour will bring us back in line with the EU more and more, unless it's Jeremy Corbyn as leader, whoever's leader of Labour.
How are we out of line with the EU?
This will happen over a number of years because the world's going to be aligned. China's going to have more and more power. Trading relationships are going to be different. It's going to be harder to get supply chains from China and things like that. So we're going to have different trading partners, and actually we're going to have to end up relying on the EU. And what Labour will do, it could be 10 years, they'll say, we want to bring us back in, and the EU will say, look how badly Britain did without us, and it'll be a mutual thing, and we'll just end up back in, or it's semi-back in. It's bound to happen.
We had too good a deal that we're not going to be going back in. There's a difference between aligning with them as our neighbours and also then going back in. They're very clear about not going in. I don't think we're going to go back in. I don't think it's the
You know
right
what we'll
thing
do,
to
Josh? We'll watch this clip in
10 years' time.
10 years' time,
I don't think.
and you'll eat your hat.
Because the people that think we are going back in are the people who work in places like Bank of England and a kind of extended blob. They vehemently think we're going back in, and it's an article of religious faith to them. They think that Starmer's coming back to save us all. So if the civil service and the extended blob all think it, it will happen
I
eventually.
just don't think that we will go back. If there was another referendum, I don't think it would go that way, to be honest.
I just think that, but what he's calling for is to improve trade relations. That's a good thing.
Yeah. All right, then. We're going to go to the Financial Times, Josh. This is kind of a big story.
Yes, so end of an era as Murdoch hands reins of media empire to Josh Howard. No, elder son. There we go. So there's a picture of him on the front looking like a pug. And we're doing a story on later.
We're doing a story on pugs later.
He looks very happy to be resigning. He's 92 years old. Respect that he got there. But it'd be interesting to see if he sort of sticks his nose out of British politics, because even a few weeks... we found out, like last week, I think, that when Rishi Sunak was going to be stepping down and resigning from the last government under Johnson, he basically stepped in and said, no, don't do it, don't do it. It's incredible the power that he has.
I'm surprised to hear you praise Rupert Murdoch, even in one way, you know, that he's reached an old age.
Whatever, I'm a big fan of Succession. Maybe maybe the Brian Cox element.
The truth is, though, that this is a man who has changed the media landscape globally more than anyone else. A lot of people would say damaged the media landscape quite irreparably.
We're not meant to talk about Talk TV on this.
Let's not mention that. But the thing is, though, Nick, that, you know, the amount of power that he invested political power within the media. The fact that when Tony Blair becomes leader of the opposition, the first thing he does is fly across the world to Rupert Murdoch's yacht to have a meeting. I mean, this kind of thing suggests that you know, this hasn't necessarily been good for the media, has it?
Some would say that, Andrew, but there was rumours that he might one day take over Talk TV. Sorry, not Talk TV, GB. Which one are we? GB News. So I have to be very careful in case that ever happens, because I just want to say I would welcome our new Murdoch overlords if that ever happened. I just want to get that in now. But like you say, Andy, it can't be too good that one person has that much power. I do get that. And it was the inspiration for Succession, except in reality, no one really cares, do they? In Succession, like, the whole world's following the movements of these people. How much have you really followed the movements of the Murdoch children? No, but how much have you really heard about them day by day? I mean, it's not quite as... I would like to see this speech, though, where Lachlan Murdoch says, I congratulate my father on his remarkable 70-year career. I want to know how Kendall Roy it was like, he's a tough son of a gun, but love you, Dad.
I don't think he's Kendall Roy, though, is he?
Oh, OK. Is he Roman?
You are alienating everyone who watches who doesn't watch Succession.
Well, they should watch Succession.
Yeah, what are they doing not watching
Is it
Succession?
definitely based on the Murdochs, or is that just like a bit of an urban myth?
It's in the article, Andrew.
It's in the article.
Yeah, there it is.
So it must be true. OK, we're going to move on to the Telegraph. Front cover of Friday's Telegraph. They have a picture of Murdoch, but they also have a story about tax cuts, Nick, and that's your favourite topic.
It is my favourite topic, and it's Hunt. Tax cuts are virtually impossible. Good old doom-monger Hunt again. So he is in a tricky position, of course, and because of the financial situation and because no one likes him. And he says there's no extra headroom to cut taxes because of the need to prioritise the pledge to halve inflation this year. So they have to halve inflation, but they have the high interest rates, so we have to pay for our debt, and of course that's harder to do when you've got high interest rates. So that's the pickle we're in. And he's saying, we already knew he was not a fan of cutting taxes. And Liz Truss, meanwhile, is sort of doing the rounds, doing interviews, saying what she would do and how we need more growth.
Well, she says she would have saved us billions.
Yeah. I know.
After she'd cost us 60 billion, then she would save us.
She is looking...
But we didn't get the chance to implement her ideas, did we?
No, we just lost the 60 billion, unfortunately.
She's looking better and better.
I made 120 billion.
She points out that, you know, rates are not lower, guilds, whatever, mortgages. So actually, it's getting harder and harder to blame Truss as time goes on. I think she looks a bit better than she did at the time, personally.
Very possibly.
But, you know, we're basically saving 11 billion this year because of the interest rates that we would have been spending to pay back the country's debts.
Right.
That 11 billion, people are suffering now, whether he's holding it back to do it just before the election. And we're also being taxed at a greater rate than since World War II.
OK, well, that's a positive note. We're going to end this section on the Daily Star. Josh, is this Josh or Nick?
This is me. I'll have
you want to do that? Because I don't understand what that... I'm a vegetarian. This sort of story doesn't interest me, really.
There's something called spam. Spam, yeah.
I know it from the Monty Python sketch. That's about it.
There we go. So save our spam. So supposedly it's on the way out, a lot less consumers. People instead are turning their nose at the meaty classic, and instead, it says here, Fancy Dan's prefer couscous and soy sauce. They talk about you, Andrew, with your couscous and soy sauce.
Wasn't spam just invented in the war as a kind of cheap thing that that would evade the rationing.
Yeah, and radar as well, and those are good inventions.
There we go then, spam and radar. Are you a fan of spam, Nick?
I have to say I'm not. I can go as far as corned beef. I like you get that little key and you open it and with
So
on the
that's
side.
fun as well, the actual activity.
Yeah, and if you're on a mountain, say, it's a good snack to have and it lasts like forever. And it's not that nice, but it, you know, it will keep you alive.
You can fry up spam and like mix it up with potatoes.
You can, but should you?
I like it's a moral question, really. I think it looks disgusting. I've never tried it, but it looks pretty gross to me.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Speaking as a herbivore.
It's all right.
Is it okay?
It's all right.
All right, well...
Top stories tonight.
Top story, yeah.
That's it for part one. Coming up, we've got schools spying on parents, right-wing extremism and anti-establishmentarianism. See you in a moment.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family. GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Friday's newspapers. I'm Andrew Doyle, still here with Josh Howie and Nick Dixon, and we're going to kick off this section with The Telegraph. Josh, a story about pronoun guidance. You've always got a lot to say about this.
Yeah, this is something I actually know about.
Yeah.
Let's go. Let's
do it.
OK, involve parents before pupils socially transition at school, says NHS England. So this is an official part of our government or country coming out and finally giving some guidance because the Department of Education, which has been saying that they're meant to have done it earlier this year, that we're going to finally tell schools what the guidance is, still haven't come out.
No, they're really dragging their heels.
They're really dragging their heels.
Schools are desperate for it. They want to know what they're meant to do.
But now we have NHS England, which in a lot of ways, we cover a lot of stories where you think they're a captured organisation and whatnot. Yeah. But actually, this is a very positive development because they're saying that, of course, you need to involve parents. But what they're saying is so obvious, like involve parents. So it's like saying to schools, you know, involve the parents before you give them a tattoo.
Right.
Whatever.
I mean, the trouble we've got here, though, is, well, firstly, the CAS report, the interim CAS report, which said that social transitioning is not a neutral act. There are ramifications. Yeah. Schools are all behaving differently on this, and they're sort of just following their own instincts. I know a teacher who was told that on the school reports home, he was to use the child's birth name, but when he talks to the pupil in class, he's to use the new name, and in other words, lie to the parents. Yeah. So, Nick, the problem with this is the government just isn't... What they need to give is statutory guide, not just advice. They need to say, this is how schools must behave, and they're not doing it.
Yeah, it's not fair to leave it ambiguous and let the teacher decide on a case-by-case. Yeah, not workable. No, they've taken far too long as well to come out with this guidance. Yeah, because I don't think teachers should have to humour any of this. I mean, tell the parents is obvious. That's, as Josh says, I mean, that's day one. That's absolutely obvious. But I don't think they should have to go along with it full stop.
But also, a number of people saying that social transitioning can put the child at risk of actually going down a pathway towards further medicalisation.
Yeah. So why are adults encouraging it in a classroom setting? It's not right, is it?
It's a real problem. Why do you think, Josh, that the government are dragging their heels? Is it just they're so scared of this topic?
Absolutely. And supposedly there are some MPs and everybody wants to be on the right side of history rather than just being on arguably the moral right. You see things in, like, people in America. You see children removed from their parents in America over this issue for not going along with social transitioning and whatever. You know, we don't... I mean, this argument's been made 1,000 times. Tattoos, earrings, getting married. Yeah. Parents have input, rightly so. So medicalisation, of which is what social transitioning can lead to, medicalisation for life of their child, chopping off healthy body parts. Yes. It's crazy that schools would in any way... And there are these external... like organisations out there that go in, because the schools don't know what to do. They bring in, pay for these external...
Yeah, people like Gendered Intelligence.
Yeah, whatever. And they come in and they tell illegal things like, don't tell parents this stuff.
Yeah, this is the other problem, is that groups like Stonewall, which represent the law as they would like it to be, not how it actually is, when you don't have guidance from the government that's clear, it opens the doorway to that kind of exploitation.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one thing I'd add, and Josh alludes to it there, is that in America it's even more crazy. So the one thing we can say is that even as slow as the government's been, we're still ahead of other countries. As shocking as that is, I know it's cold comfort, but we are ahead of a lot of other countries.
But I don't know how useful this NHS guidance... I mean, it's useful, but it's not what we need.
They have something to point to, at least.
Yeah, it's something. It's a start. But the government needs to just get on with it, frankly. Anyway, we're moving on now to Friday's Guardian, Nick, and schools are taking a big brother attitude towards their pupils.
Yeah, it's called to shut down Bristol School's use of app to monitor pupils and families. It's an app called Think Family Education app, and it's used by more than 100 schools, and it allows quite a lot of data, actually. You can track antisocial behaviour, domestic violence incidents, even the family's financial situation. And, of course, apparently, yeah, it saves access to sensitive personal details about families' financial situations.
Well, if they're on, like school meals.
Oh, yeah. So, and the
not
question
like
is,
tax statements or anything.
Probably not. The question is, would you want that available? And Avon and Somerset Police are saying, you know, it's all perfectly ethical and it's helpful. And the argument is the parents don't seem to know about it, and whereas the teachers can have all this access. The argument is the teachers can help, you know, children who are in trouble, you know, and be aware of it. But, of course, the argument against is this sort of surveillance aspect, the abuse of tech. And you think, why does The Guardian care about that? Because they famously now don't seem to care about tech overreach. They don't care about civil liberties. But in this case, they do. Why? Because they're worried about racial profiling. So there is a Guardian concern, because they're worried that this will reproduce racialised ideas of problematic behaviour. So you think that someone's in a gang or something because you have this information, and then you start to profile them, and maybe they weren't as bad as you thought.
Is that a legitimate concern, Josh?
Well, it's a slightly ridiculous concern, because they're sort of going, well, what, you know, why do you think that it's going to be targeting people from ethnic minorities? You know, we've just got to look at it's not about targeting, it's about looking at the data.
Yes,
and I know,
that's what I don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, well, I actually know something about this, believe it or not, because before I had before this, I used to have a proper job.
Yes.
And I literally did this. I worked for social services and I did the filing, and you'd have these files and you're trying to collate the different families with different organisations and whatnot, and that has been a real issue in the past, because there are families that we see slip through the net. And my wife also worked for a charity, working in a primary school, you know, with parents who are drug addicts or drug dealers or in jail or murdered and all these different things. But it's about capturing these kids, and it's an early warning system. It makes total sense to me. Bring that information, find these kids who are at risk early, and you can actually make a real impact on their lives.
So we don't have to worry about the Guardian's concerns?
No.
Well, I think that's a good mantra for life.
It's a general, yeah.
Basically. OK, let's move on now to this one. This is The Telegraph. Should we be copying the Danes? Josh?
Yeah, in many ways.
Many ways?
Many ways. Furniture and the Art Deco.
A general aesthetic.
Yeah, just that vibe.
Yeah.
I love it. Hunt urged to, and also they're into board games. Anyway, Hunt urged to copy Danish benefit system to boost job switching. So this is quite an interesting idea that people being scared of losing their jobs.
Yes.
It's actually holding back our job market in a lot of ways, or the dynamics of it. And so when they're basically what they're saying is when people leave, or
lose
their jobs essentially, and as long as they've been working there for a year,
yeah,
at least 12 months, then they should get 65% of their salary because they won't then just be forced to take the first job.
But just for a 3-month period.
Just for a 3-month period,
yeah.
But it gives them that leeway. And it seems like a win-win situation. Like, by the way, in America, in the Netherlands, it's like 75% of your salary. Denmark, 90%, so 65%. But what they're saying is, because we've got 1.5 billion people unemployed, and this is only going to be a tiny, tiny fragment of those unemployed who have lost their job, have worked there for 12 months and lost their job. Yeah. But it will make a big difference to people's choices and increase the kind of job they can get, in which case they get a better job, better paid, they'll be able to pay more taxes, and it's going to cost very little money
Nick,
to do it.
This sounds eminently sensible to me, and people do get trapped in jobs because they fear, what will happen if they leave, if they're, living from paycheck to paycheck.
Hint, hint.
Then... No, I'm not hinting anything. I want Nick to stay here and thrive. But, it's a good idea, right?
Well, I'll have to, because I'm only going to get 14% of the average wage in this country if I leave, compared to, as you say, Denmark's 90%, Netherlands 75, Canada 55. The problem is, none of those countries are countries I particularly like. They're all kind of socialist sort of countries. But I do think it's a reasonable plan. It's for people who've been in work 12 months, so it's not for people who are scamming the system. It's people who just are scared, as you say, about moving job. They'll have more of a safety net. The benefit system is already a socialist idea, so it doesn't particularly matter that there's an extra bit of socialism on top. Probably seems reasonable to try.
OK, well, we're going to move on to this story about Germany. Right-wing extremism on the rise. Your specialist subject.
I thought you might say something like that, but I'm just going to accept it because you can probably sack me. Right-wing extremist views increasingly widespread in Germany, study finds. And, of course, it's The Guardian, so we all have to take a pinch of salt immediately about what they mean, because they are calling Meloni's party far-right and other parties that really aren't particularly far-right. Hang on. No, that might be the next story. Anyway, the point is, this is the University of Bielefeld. I don't know, Bielefeld. I pronounced it the third time.
Let's go Bielefeld.
Yeah, I got it the third time.
Bielefeld?
Yeah, and it's just about whether Germany's becoming more right-wing. And you sort of read it and go, OK, yeah, Germany's becoming far-right again, it's all terrifying. But actually, I'm not sure that is the real story, because it then says less than 60% said they had faith in democracy and institutions. And there was a rise in people saying our country increasingly resembles a dictatorship as a bad thing, right? And that politicians and the media were in bed together. So The Guardian first is saying, look, it's right-wing extremism in the rise in Germany. It has gone slightly up. But to me, the real takeaway of the story is actually just that people don't trust the kind of neoliberal establishment, and that's what they're rebelling against.
So this is confusing, isn't it, Josh? Because is it not the case that because definitionally terms like far-right get misused so often, that it might just be the case that actually political ideals aren't shifting, but our perception of them is?
That is definitely possible, and there is some definite truth to that. But when you have 16.5% of Germany going, the Jewish people are trying to take advantage of their Nazi part, the Germans' Nazi past, should point that out, and further anti-Semitic positions that are being positioned and are growing out there, it's kind of scary. But yeah, I could see that there is a reaction to what, in the way that Nick's saying. But, things like this, politicians and the media are in bed together. Well, I heard Jacob Rees-Mogg earlier on the channel, and he didn't, it was fine.
There we go. Thanks for that, Josh. I think we'll move on there. We're going to go to this next story, which is The Guardian again. It's our favourite tonight, isn't it? European politics. It seems like the establishment isn't popular. Josh?
Well, it's very similar to the last one, but it's broader because it's actually saying that it's not just like far right, it's far left as well. It's populism.
Well, they're talking about your populism, exactly.
Which basically they are designate as you having like two homogenous and opposing groups. Basically, you have like these pure people, which the right and the left have that. The far left certainly have that idea. Yeah. You're purist politics versus this corrupt elite, and they argue that all politics should be an expression of the people. So the far left and the far right both lean into that kind of populism.
But the stats are interesting. 1 in 3 Europeans are voting for populist parties, in other words, be that on the left or the right.
Yeah.
Because often we think about... But why has populism become such a dirty word, the idea of a party that appeals to the wishes of the people. Why is that a bad thing?
I guess because it could lead to fascism.
But like Bernie Sanders was a populist success story.
Well, any politician is populist in that they are winning the most vote. But the point is, this is coming from anti-establishment lines, and I think Bernie Sanders would have been a terrible...
Nick, you're not one to defend the establishment. Isn't this quite a good thing?
Yeah, this is an absurd article, and this is one I did mean before. So they're saying that all politics should be an expression of the will of the people, and they're calling that populism. Could be called democracy.
Yeah.
And what's hilarious is that the Guardian is sort of uncomfortable with this, and it says, oh, there's the rise of the nativist authoritarian far right. It's like, they're not actually authoritarian. The people in this article are calling for democracy, and it's the new authoritarian neoliberal establishment that is under threat. That's what's clearly happening in this piece. That's why it's hilarious. People's needs are not being dealt with, whether it's immigration, whether it's cost of living, whatever it is, and instead the establishment, the professional managerial class, as it's sometimes called, is pushing these niche ideas like critical race theory. I'd call net zero another one. And that's what people are rebelling against. That's what I get from this. I mean, The Guardian calls it an increasingly problematic challenge to the mainstream. It's so funny that they're so establishment now, that they're so threatened by this. They call Maloney far right. She's not considered far right. And look at this. One professor in this calls the Tories, look at Britain's Tories, in their discourse and rhetoric, they are radical right. So we have to take this with a huge pinch of salt because they think the Tories are radical right.
Josh, isn't it the case that when you have a situation where mainstream parties are not garnering the kind of success they once did, that the solution to that is for them to create better arguments, be more persuasive, not to sort of just dismiss all of these new parties that are coming up?
Yeah, but I guess part of it goes down to tribalism as well. So you would argue, and people would just and about loyalty and staying within their group. But there is I think people feel betrayed by either party, but traditional parties. You get a lot of people out there who are saying, I'm not going to vote Tory or Labour or anything. They feel let down over the last amount of years, that they're not seeing what
But is
they
the solution to that basically a fear of democracy, which is what's going on here, which is dressed up as this kind of anti-populist rhetoric?
I guess the point is it's whether those can lessen the rules. I'm always going to be a bit... There's truth to it, but I also like... comfort.
We all like comfort, Josh. Politics is not the realm for comfort.
But I mean, if they call lockdowns a hobby horse, I mean, and then they talk about authoritarianism, that was actual authoritarianism.
Right, OK, well, that's all we've got time for this part, but do stay tuned for classic British culture, good old-fashioned cancel culture, and questionable Saudi sporting culture. See you in a minute.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there. Thursday's blustery showers will ease overnight. Some drier and clearer spells, but also a cool night to come with temperatures widely in the single figures before further showers on Friday. Now, we've lost the persistent spells of rain that we saw earlier in the week, especially across western parts of the UK. But we've still got quite a number of showers circulating around an old area of low pressure that's sitting to the north of Scotland. And that means there will be further showers overnight, especially for western Scotland, Northern Ireland, western parts of England and Wales. And there'll be some showers or even some thunderstorms just running through the channel close to Kent at times overnight. But inland, actually plenty of clear spells, and under those clear spells with light winds, temperatures falling into the mid to high single figures or even the low single figures for northern parts of the UK. So a fresh start on Friday, but a bright start for many. Decent spells of sunshine across the Midlands into eastern England for a time. The bulk of the showers during the morning will be in the west. They'll move east. The odd rumble of thunder in eastern England by the afternoon. And it's a cool day compared with what we've experienced so far in September. That leads us on to a frosty start in places on Saturday. Touch of frost mid-Wales northwards in sheltered spots, but actually plenty of sunshine. And it's looking like a fair day for the vast majority. The cloud will build into the afternoon, but decent dry and bright weather lingers on. That is until Sunday, when persistent rain returns to the west, a bit warmer in the south and east.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton, for 2 hours packed full of unfiltered opinions, unique takes, and fiery debates. I guarantee you blockbuster guests and exclusive reporting with no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I think there is a culture of collusion, quite frankly.
And no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio, and online, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Friday's newspapers. Kicking off this section with The Times. Nick, the Russell Brand story rumbles on.
It does indeed. Rumble refuses to join Russell Brand cancel culture mob. And this is CEO Chris Pavlovski rejects disturbing query from senior Tory MP about dropping the comic from his video sharing site. I'm sure you've heard the story. It's Dame Caroline Dinaj, that's how you pronounce it. Yeah, it's Dinaj. And what she did, she's the chairwoman of the Culture, Media and Sports-led Committee. And for some reason, she took it upon herself to write to X, TikTok, Rumble and others saying, you know, why are you allowing Russell Brand to make a living, essentially? She said, we're concerned that he may be able to profit from his content on the platform. And people have been rightly asking, what business is it of hers, whether someone who's not been charged with anything, just at this point, an innocent citizen, a civilian, who's trying to make money, who's going to lose $1 million a year from advertising income on YouTube. Whatever you think to Russell Brand, why is it Dame Caroline Dinaj, however you say it, I can't say it. Why is it her job to do this? It's absolutely absurd.
It's sinister, actually.
It's sinister.
It's backfired.
And she has to resign.
So at this point, you know, when you have someone in the government urging social media platforms to basically censor those who have not been through due process, that whatever you think about the situation, that is not a precedent we want to set, is it, Josh?
No, of course not. And it buys into his narrative that he's putting out there, that he's being sort of victimised because he's telling the truth and the big corporations and the governments are all out to get him. So it's a ridiculous sort of shot in the foot in that way. And the other thing is that people... And I saw a friend on Facebook's like, right, oh, look, this is great. This is a great thing. And you're like, and, you know, oh, the right are going to complain about it. It's like... You're backing a big corporation here, unilaterally, like in terms of YouTube, like unilaterally affecting the rights of individuals.
I will never understand people who claim to be on the left cheering on corporate censorship.
It's absolutely
Makes
mental.
no sense at
all.
all.
But look, respect to Rumble for coming forward. Look, there are people on that platform that I particularly don't like. Alex Jones, who sort of famously, you know, said the whole Sandy Hook shootings didn't happen, and the parents, the poor thing, what they went through, and Andrew Tate, sorry.
He's not here.
Well, in form, in...
I know what you're saying, Josh.
Yeah.
We don't have to agree with everything on a platform to say, look, free speech still matters. The big free speech battles are going to be about big tech. Let's face it, going forward, that's what's going to happen. But I also have to say, the timing of this is interesting because this week the House of Lords passed the Online Safety Bill, which is a disastrous and authoritarian bill, which effectively outsources state censorship to unelected regulators and big tech. So when it coincides in this way, it adds credence to this view that the government is really happy about using big tech to further its own means. And of course, since the Twitter files, we know that this has been going on, that there's been collusion between major governments and social media. This is not good.
No, and it seems to have no regard for the law or our basic rights. Some people even pointed out it goes against Magna Carta. No free man shall be seized, imprisoned, dispossessed, outlawed, exiled or ruined in any way, nor in any way proceeded against, except by the lawful judgment of his peers and the law of the land. So it just sort of goes against our entire English tradition. It goes against the law. What are you doing? It's insane.
And do you think she will resign off this?
She has to resign. I'm not saying she will, but she must if she has... I mean, hopefully she will, because this is just outrageous.
OK, the Mirror now. This is... it's odd when Jimmy Savile's name crops up in headlines, but what's this one about?
Yeah, Jimmy Savile, police unit to probe Russell Brand case amid sexual assault allegations. So, now they've got them on the case because this incident has come out after the TV show was broadcast, where this woman said... Now, she said that he sort of held...
This is Brand again.
This is Brand again. This is what she's saying. Is a fifth victim. She said he pinned her down, kissed her, and she said, stop, and then he stopped.
Right.
And then he was abusive verbally. You know, that's not cool. But, like...
So this doesn't sound to you like criminality, it sounds to you like bad behaviour?
Yes, it sounds like bad behaviour. I don't know what the law is for, like, I don't know how long it was he held her down for, if she said stop immediately, he kissed her once or whatever. Like, she came backstage. But then also they get the dates wrong here. They said that this accusation was from 2003, but they met in 2008 or whatever. Like, it's like, even that's confusing, like if they went back in time. And the other thing that this is in the Mirror, and the other thing they keep on saying, Brand 48 has been accused of rape, sexual assault and emotional abuse. And they've said that they actually repeat the same thing a few times, emotional abuse, and they put it all together.
That's always a worry with this stuff.
I mean, look, that's not good behaviour. Totally. Yeah. Like, bad boyfriend, bad human being, arguably. But emotional abuse is not the same.
This is something that happened after the Me Too movement, and a lot of feminist writers even criticised this. They were saying what happened was effectively you had this conflation of terrible behaviour. You remember that list of it was like a dossier of sexual behaviour from within the House of Commons, and it was conflating sexual assault with people who'd met at work and got married, and even someone putting a hand on a knee, and all of this was seen as the same thing. And it's actually really denigrating to victims of sexual assault to start suggesting that these sorts of things are the same. They're not the same.
Well, the same thing happened. The female comedians had a sort of WhatsApp group and a list that went out, and it just got way out of control. And it was like people going on for crazy reasons.
Nick, do you worry about this kind of thing when you get this kind of the slipperiness of terms so that everything starts becoming a serious assault?
Yeah, well, I started out as no fan of Brand, but the reaction is getting so hysterical that now I'm becoming annoyed about that. I mean, to compare him to Jimmy Savile, I mean, it's very hard to recover from such a lurid headline. And one way they are similar is that the media created them both, and now the same media tells us they're terrible and we all have to go along with that. So they created... The media gets these people, they know what the people are like from the start, they promote them, and then they tell us they're terrible. I mean, there was a thread on X about inappropriate comments that have surfaced that Russell Brand did. It was stuff he'd said on BBC Radio openly. His career was 90% inappropriate comments and 10% hair. You know what he was. You know, that's what he's always been.
It's a real problem, though, isn't it? Because we know that rape is underreported, underconvicted, and we know that it is difficult for women to come forward, even still, to the police. Because they know that it's likely that their case won't make it to court even. But on the other hand, we've also seen when you get these high-profile stories about accusations, a lot of false allegations will suddenly appear. Operation Midland being an obvious example, where there were some palpably false, ridiculous, fantastical claims that were taken seriously by the police. You know, it's a difficult situation.
Well, the question is, how much... And that cost millions.
And ruined lives.
Yeah, and ruined lives. What kind of waste of resources are we're going to see here? Or is it worth those resources for them to look into it and actually get to the bottom of this stuff?
Yes.
I personally think it's interesting that this thing came out the other day, and in that time, and I understand reasons why people don't speak out and whatever, but at the same time, no one else has come out, and that seems like maybe more people will. Maybe there's...
We just don't know.
But
OK, so The Guardian next. A story about Piers Morgan, Nick.
Yeah, interesting one. Piers Morgan says due impartiality rules for British TV out of date. So he was at a media conference where he said that our television rules are anachronistic and that they can be manipulated by lobby groups and powerful people, as we've noticed. I mean, you get activist groups now, as we've noticed, they can get on X and they can do a long thread, and at the end they say, and report GB News to Ofcom, and then people do, and then Ofcom are flooded with complaints, and they're only human, they're going to investigate a certain number if they get all these complaints, and it's very unfair. And he points out it wasn't like that when he was at ITV, so you have to ask, are the new channels being more targeted? I asked the question, I don't know the answer. I'm sure Ofcom tried to be fair, but it is difficult. And our very own leader, Angelo, points out that journalism should be about looking at all perspectives. The regulatory layer weakens the ability of the broadcaster and the journalist to apply their judgment of what impartiality is. And I mean, I have to be impartial, and I can't really agree with him because then then I'm too partial. So I'm in a tricky position.
It's tricky.
But yeah,
but the thing is, Josh, I mean, on this show, we're very good, I think, at balance and impartiality, and we hear all sides.
No, we're not.
Shut up, Josh.
Okay.
What do you think?
That was the balance.
That was the balance. There we go. Just a bit of a row.
Yeah, just
to make,
have to create our own Andrew Pierce Bev Turner moment.
That's what we were trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. But this is about free. Well, this channel was set up for free speech and to allow debate, which is going to apply that different positions are going to be put forward.
Well, that's a good point, because, you know, when there was that argument between Bev and Andrew on the show, you had Owen Jones tweeting saying her point of view should never have been allowed to be expressed on TV. You had, who was it who was basically saying it? You commented on this idea.
Because someone else went on and said, "Oh, look at people at GB News. They just don't know which way to go.
Hugo Rifkin,
they don't know which way to go on this or whatever." And it's like,
as if we have a unified front.
We're individuals. We have individual opinions, and we're expressing them.
It's the point of the channel.
The idea, but we're not coming in this kind of group think. This is what we say when we work for the Times. This is what we say when we work for the BBC. No, it's like we're coming in here. Look, I disagree with loads of people on this channel. Yeah. That's the point. That may the best argument win.
Is it just the case that people like Hugo Rifkin, who work for those sorts of companies where everyone generally has the same opinion, it shocks them when they see people on a channel disagreeing? Maybe, is that it, Nick?
Yeah, they're not used to that in a sort of... it's funny, because if you're part of the establishment mainstream media, you apparently just wait for the high-status opinion and repeat it. Whereas on this channel, we do just have our own genuine opinion. And people who don't watch the channel claim it's one thing, but it's actually... I think it's the most impartial channel there is. We have all sorts of crazy... We've had people advocating abortion up to 9 months on this channel, which I think is monstrous, and yet we exist on the same channel. And I would basically say that's murder. So it's an incredibly broad range of views. I also question Ofcom in the way that Piers Morgan is. Why is it up to them? Because then they're bound to be within the Overton window by their nature, you know. So it's very hard to regulate and say where the centre is and what should be permitted.
OK, well, that's it for part 3, but in the final section, do stay tuned for a look into the lives of our ancestors, why people block the doors on trains, and some news about GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Friday's newspapers. Let's kick off this section with Friday's Independent. And Britain is a liberal-minded country except for certain issues, apparently.
Yes, Britain becoming more liberal-minded, but not on trans issues, survey finds. So this is actually very misleading. It's the way the question was framed, and where you had 37% of the public held liberal views in 2005 in terms of different type of marriage structures, and now that's increased to 63%. So this is by the British Social Attitudes. But they're saying at the same time that over the past 3 years, hostility towards transgender people has increased. 64% describing themselves not prejudiced, and it's declined by 18% since 2019. Now, the reason why I would say this has happened is it's not that people are against trans people at all, but they have realised that there is a conflict of rights. Also, what we define as trans people have changed over the last however many years, because it used to be people with, who
Gender dysphoria, transsexuals.
What it did was they went, no, you know what, we're going to bring transvestites in.
Yeah.
Which is arguably a sexual fetish or whatever, but it's not the same as what people had in mind.
Or non-binary.
Or non-binary and all of this different stuff. So people are against an ideology that they see grooming our children, medicalising them, and this is what people... And also inflicting on women's rights.
Nick, isn't just that the people who are making this report don't know what liberal means? Actually, to be suggesting that you are worried about the erosion of women's rights, you're worried about the erosion of gay rights, that comes with this sort of gender identity ideology, that's the liberal position. So actually, it looks like the country's becoming liberal on all counts. It's just they don't know what liberal means.
It's a good point, and they also don't know what liberal means in regards to the size of the state. They say increasingly they think the government should play a bigger role, and they're calling that liberalism. Of course, it's the opposite of classic English liberalism.
I think people just don't know what it means.
Yeah, it's maybe socialism or leftism or something, but yeah, it's absurd. And this article tells on itself, because it admits that Britain's becoming more liberal on all issues, but not trans issues. Oh, why is that? Well, obviously there's a problem, isn't there? And it's because people, just 30% think that people should be able to change the sex on their birth certificate, which used to be 53%, but people have become more aware of the issue and the problems, so of course people don't like it. And the article just reveals itself. The thing they do get right is that state intervention amongst Conservatives is up and the sort of Thatcherite opinion is down, and that is correct. And they also point out that basically that working class people have much more of a problem than middle class people, and of course they do because they're most affected by it.
OK, let's move on to the Times now, and we now know it's not computer games making us more violent.
Yeah.
Josh.
This is really interesting. Early humans were just as violent as today. So they give the sort of background of it. There have been two schools of thoughts. Rousseau, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who basically said that we used to live in this kind of Garden of Eden, idyllic state, and now, and then other people, Thomas Hobbes, basically saying that we were violent all the way through. And they've basically found all the 10,000 years of burials. They've looked at them all, found loads of old skulls with smashed in and whatnot, and essentially before that we moved into this agricultural era that we live in now, basically everyone was still killing each other then.
Well, of course, I mean, there's something essentially bestial about human nature that is uncivilised. I think Rousseau got it wrong, didn't he, Nick?
Yeah, it was always a ludicrous, naive idea.
Was that all you got to say on that?
Well, I thought you wanted to sort of move on towards the end of the show, so I just went boom.
No, I thought you wanted to do a mic drop moment. That's why it was... And it worked.
That was it.
It was
very violent, very passively aggressively violent.
We do have time for one more story now. This is the Metro, and it's a story about GB News, which I'm always interested in. What's the scoop, Josh?
GB News guest complains after gender-neutral toilets only to let slip the broadcaster has them. So this is ridiculous because it actually has come up 1,000 times before. Everybody always mentions, oh, it's just in the toilet. I hate these gender-neutral toilets. OK, whether I feel safe in them because I'm a man.
Yeah.
But I don't feel safe when you're in them.
But, you know, going in there, I went to the toilet, I had a big old... You know, Christina Hamilton's outside.
TMI.
I don't want to have that thing. I don't like it.
You're giving far too much detail there, Josh. But
I've revealed her name.
Do you think that...
I'm just grimacing from that, but go on.
You think we should do away with our gender-neutral toilets?
Yeah, they're horrible. Everyone hates them. And as Josh said, it's been raised multiple times, so it's not a scoop. Sorry, Metro. Everyone hates them, particularly women hate them. They've said it to me repeatedly. There are other toilets available, but it is like being in Ally McBeal. Remember Ally McBeal?
I never actually saw Ally McBeal.
Well, it's a lot like that, Andrew. The viewers at home will love that reference.
I haven't seen that. I haven't seen Succession either, so I will do all of these
just
things.
writing books all the time.
That's all
and
I'm
doing
doing.
talks.
Stop thinking and just
watch TV.
Why are they always so keen though to get like a scoop on GB News? And I don't. It's what keeps us in the papers, I suppose. Maybe
number one news channel.
Well, we beat Sky and BBC the other day, so they weren't very happy about that. But ultimately, you know, this is not a scoop. You know, it's not a big deal. But I agree with you that most of the women I talk to do have a real problem with gender-neutral toilets. Most of the men don't seem to care one way or the other.
I don't know. I think men do care.
Do you think?
Yeah, just I want Nick to walk out.
I don't even go in them now out of respect for the women. I mean, my bladder exploded, but I feel, you know, solidarity.
OK.
Very solid.
OK, on that lovely note, the show is nearly over. We're going to have another quick look at Friday's front pages. So the Daily Mail is leading with this story. Starmer lets cat out of the bag on Brexit betrayal. Some fears that he's going to try and get us back in the EU. The Telegraph has Hunt. Tax cuts are virtually impossible. The Guardian is running with campaigners plan legal challenges to Sunak's U-turn on green policies. The Mirror has For Your Eyes Only, a beautician on a spy charge. The Sun is leading with BBC shame over flasher brand. And finally, the Daily Star, Save Our Spam, which we spoke about earlier, and I don't want to revisit. That's all we've got time for. Thanks to my guests, Josh Howie and Nick Dixon. Leo Kearse is back tomorrow at 11 o'clock, along with Lewis Schaefer and Cressida Wetton, so don't miss that. And if you're watching right now at 5 a.m. for the repeat, please stay tuned for breakfast.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there. Thursday's blustery showers will ease overnight. Some drier and clearer spells, but also a cool night to come with temperatures widely in the single figures before further showers on Friday. Now, we've lost the persistent spells of rain that we saw earlier in the week, especially across western parts of the UK. But we've still got quite a number of showers circulating around an old area of low pressure that's sitting to the north of Scotland. And that means there will be further showers overnight, especially for western Scotland, Northern Ireland, western parts of England and Wales. And there'll be some showers or even some thunderstorms just running through the channel close to Kent at times overnight. But inland, actually plenty of clear spells, and under those clear spells with light winds, temperatures falling into the mid to high single figures or even the low single figures for northern parts of the UK. So a fresh start on Friday, but a bright start for many. Decent spells of sunshine across the Midlands into eastern England for a time. The bulk of the showers during the morning will be in the west. They'll move east. The odd rumble of thunder in eastern England by the afternoon. And it's a cool day compared with what we've experienced so far in September. That leads us on to a frosty start in places on Saturday. Touch of frost mid-Wales northwards in sheltered spots, but actually plenty of sunshine. And it's looking like a fair day for the vast majority. The cloud will build into the afternoon, but decent dry and bright weather lingers on. That is until Sunday, when persistent rain returns to the west, a bit warmer in the south and east.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
And Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
At last, there is clear blue water between the Labour and Conservative parties as the Labour Party hits back after Rishi Sunak's net zero statement yesterday. We'll ask, have the Labour Party got themselves into the right place? We'll talk Lampedusa. We'll talk to the Red Cross. We'll also talk to a European politician and an immigration rights lawyer. There are now calls in Poland and elsewhere to call a complete halt to what is going on in the Mediterranean. And joining me on Talking Pints, he's the old Etonian who planned a coup in Equatorial Guinea. No, Simon Mann's story really is true. But before all of that, let's get the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you. Good evening. Well, the Bank of England has left its interest rate unchanged at 5.25%. Our economics and business editor Liam Halligan has more.
After 14 successive rate rises from 0.1% at the end of 2001 all the way up to 5.25%, the Bank of England has finally decided enough is enough, and inflation is now coming down, and there's no need, for now at least, to raise rates anymore. This will be a huge relief to young families with variable rate mortgages. It will be a huge relief to companies with variable rate loans. It will be a huge relief to many consumers across the country.
Liam Halligan there. Well, the Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves said, despite the bank's decision, Britain is worse off under the Conservatives.
I think there will be a sense of relief, particularly for those who are coming up to the end of their mortgage deals. But let's look at where we are in the bigger picture. because somebody coming up to remortgage their house today is looking at paying £220 more a month than they would have done if they had have remortgaged a year ago. So this is still a very challenging time for families and businesses with the cost of living crisis, which continues to bite.
Well, borrowers may start to feel the benefits of the Bank of England's announcement. Shortly after it was made, Nationwide said it'll be cutting the majority of its fixed-rate mortgages, the country's biggest building society saying they'll now offer 5- and 10-year fixed-rate mortgages of below 5% for first-time buyers and home movers. Away from the economy, the Prime Minister says hard-pressed families shouldn't have to pay an unaffordable price for the UK to reach net zero. But Shadow Minister for Industry and Decarbonisation Sarah Jones said the government's plan to roll back some climate policies is the wrong decision. Rishi Sunak hit back, saying he won't proceed with plans that would punish motorists and working people.
We've been through the numbers and we're absolutely confident that we are on track to hit all our international and domestic targets, which, by the way, are world leading. And the reason I have confidence in that is because we've over-delivered on all of our carbon budgets to date. Despite everyone saying, oh, you might not hit them, we've over-delivered on them. Plus, we can see that the costs of some of these new technologies are falling far faster than people have predicted. Offshore wind is a great example of that. Cost today 70% less than we predicted in 2016.
And lastly, the King has paid tribute to what he's called the indispensable working relationship between the United Kingdom and France on the second day of his visit there. His Majesty and Queen Camilla spent the afternoon visiting a flower market despite the rain before heading to Notre Dame Cathedral. And earlier, he became the first British monarch to speak from the Senate chamber in Paris. And he celebrated the friendship and warm familiarity between the two nations, as well as unity on issues like climate change. You're with GB News across the UK on TV, in your car, on digital radio, and now on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. This is Britain's news channel.
Good evening. Well, we now have a choice. A gap in British politics. Thank goodness for that, because for the last 6 months I've been thinking we'll have a general election between Tweedledum and Tweedledee and there'll be no policy differences whatsoever. But Ed Miliband, yes, he's back, absolutely, in a very prominent position, saying that if Labour come to power, they will bring back the 2030 deadline, after which you won't be able to buy a new car that is petrol or diesel. And they're saying they do not agree with the extension out until 2035 for gas and oil boilers. Now, I've no doubt we'll hear much more from the Labour Party at their conference, but it's a clear piece of policy positioning. I have to say myself, I thought that the relaxation on people who use oil for their boilers was very necessary, because there are 1.7 million people living off-grid, mostly out there in rural England, many of them pensioners, living in bungalows, for whom the idea that they wouldn't be able to replace their oil tank, their oil burner, they'd have to get a heat pump, which would still cost them a huge amount of money and be highly inappropriate. I think that was actually one of the best things that was done yesterday. But Labour have set out their stall. What does all of that mean for the red wall vote? And we went through the polling last night. We sat here, and it was clear that 2019 voters, a good solid two-thirds of them, thought Sunak was right. So have Labour positioned this correctly? Have Labour got this right? Give me your thoughts, please. Farage@gbnews.com. Joining me, Matthew Lazar, former head of broadcasting at the Labour Party, and Ed Miliband advisor, and now with Policy Network. Well, I think both of us are quite refreshed to see
absolutely.
Actually a debate going
I know,
on.
you're absolutely right, Nigel. I mean, it's good to see a proper debate about policy and not about slices of cake or curries or you know what.
Or beers.
or beers, anything.
No. Now, this is interesting, because Professor Goodwin sat where you are last night with a piece of exclusive polling, and it made it clear that the comfortable urban middle classes, suburbia, they actually rather like their electric cars, and they can afford a new one, and it's not really a problem at all, and they think the government should stick to the original net zero targets. But when you get out into working class voters, when you get out in particular to that group of voters, the ones that left the Labour Party, a lot of them came through me.
Yes, absolutely.
On to Boris Johnson, and you think about them, you think about older people, you think about people on low incomes. You know, they've been really scared about many of the implications of net zero, and it's a debate that's gathered steam, despite very little political debate in Parliament over it. And I just wonder, from a Labour perspective, has Ed Miliband put them in the right place today?
Well, I think that they've been very careful today to sort of try and have their cake and eat it by being clear on the car target. They're slightly fudging it on the boilers. They'll be discussing that.
It's vague.
It's vague because they'll be discussing that behind closed doors now, because that's where the political worry is. Because let's remind ourselves, on cars, this is about people buying new cars. This isn't asking anybody to change anything. It's not asking anybody to go out and spend money to force people to do something they don't want. It's just forcing them to maybe spend their money on something they don't want, but it's slightly different. And the background to all this, of course, is ULEZ, as we know, which is really, really worrying the Labour Party, because what should have been a slam dunk in terms of the London mayoral election is now a real challenge and a nightmare. Nobody would have thought a year ago that Labour's biggest worry politically would be the London mayoral elections next May.
Yeah, things change.
Absolutely, they certainly do. So as far as the Red Wall is concerned, yes, Labour generally on the environment has to travel a very careful path between its two different interest groups, as it were. We've seen that with oil and gas recently, where the policy had to be if you're cynical, you call it a fudge. You might call it a sensible compromise if you weren't, between what the trade unions want, which is to say yes to all oil and gas, and what the environmental lobby and many of those voters you're talking about want, which is to stop all oil and gas exploration. And a similar debate will be going on today in Keir's office about this.
It's funny, isn't it? You know, working class voters actually want all this stuff relaxed or got rid of completely. Middle class voters quite like all this net zero stuff. The trade unions actually think what Rishi's done is the right thing. Some of the giant global corporates take the opposite view. I mean, left and right politics.
Well, I would say slightly, sort of, but I slightly disagree, Nigel, just on the thing. I think the difference is that on the boilers issue, the boilers is about forcing people, when their boiler breaks down, to buy an expensive system, which at the moment we don't think works as effectively in most cases. It does in some cases, but not in most cases, as the existing thing. That's a big political nightmare. We've seen it in Germany, where the coalition in Germany is almost to a collapsing point on this very issue. And there, effectively, you've got two parties representing those two interests in the Greens and in the SPD with more traditional voters. But on the unions want to keep electric and to build electric vehicle jobs in Britain, so they will be backing this sort of people like manufacturing made in the UK.
Well, yes, I mean, that's true, but equally the unions are quite happy to build petrol and diesel cars for a few more.
They will, but I think that the unions, like most of the industry, think that the EV is the future and they want to keep it in the global game. But I can tell you that the people, and we're really worried about those Red Wall voters. Remember, 40% of people in the lowest economic groups don't have access to a car, so the one of those two that they're worried about is the boilers. So you can absolutely predict that Labour will not go back to what the Tories were saying 2 days ago about boilers.
I seriously question that figure. And maybe 40% of those that live in big cities.
Well, that's meant to be the figure across the UK. It's 80% in the big cities.
Yeah, I struggle with that, because actually, if you live outside the big cities, a car is a necessity.
But sometimes there's only one in the family, not two, so that does have an impact.
Now, Montreal. The conference in Montreal.
Absolutely. I'm with you, Nigel, not in Montreal. I used to organise this conference with good old Justin. I've got a great selection of photos of me and Justin in his selection of jazzy jackets. But there was more serious content this week.
Yeah, I mean, Keir Starmer basically saying we mustn't diverge from Europe because unless we stay with EU law, we'll lower standards. It's almost as if Keir Starmer is saying everything that comes from Europe is wonderful. We're not capable of making environmental law ourselves. This really was Remain a talk, or even almost rejoin a talk.
Well, I think there's no question of rejoining. However much in his heart Keir may want to, his head will certainly rule that out. And they're absolutely clear that the manifesto will commit to not rejoining because it would be political suicide otherwise. This is exactly the political divide that we were just talking about over the environment. It's exactly the same political divide. There's huge pressure, of course, within the party as well, where 90% plus of members voted to remain. In fact, probably higher than that now. The sort of left levers have left alongside Corbyn. So there's huge political pressure. He's trying to walk a tightrope. I think he needs to be very careful on his language, because the Tories are going to weaponise. These are the two things they want to weaponise most in the Red Wall. They're going to want to weaponise the environment and the green pledges, and they want to weaponise Europe. So there is no rejoining. If they want to have a closer relationship, they need to find a form of words that sort of outlines it, which is not. Well, I don't think they want to go that far at all. I don't think they want to be talking about membership as a word in any sense.
If you stay aligned, it's still Brino, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it is.
Name only.
Yeah, I mean, effectively, what they need to do is be clear what they want, and be clear if there are benefits from having a closer trade relationship. But at the moment, the language, I think, is is difficult because, I mean, you will remember this. Tony Blair used to give lots of lovely speeches saying how pro-European he was, but he never gave them in Britain. He always used to go abroad. And I think the optics, as somebody who used to organise that conference, and I know that backdrop well, I probably wouldn't have been talking about it amidst, in Montreal, amidst, with Justin Trudeau and that sort of forum. He should be in Darlington if he's going to be talking about this, saying it's because of jobs in electric vehicles that I want to do this, X, Y and Z. So the messaging needs to be better.
2024 just got a whole load more interesting.
It certainly has.
Matthew, thank you very much indeed.
Nigel.
In a moment, we'll talk Lampedusa, we'll begin with the Red Cross and then debate. Are some of the calls that are now coming from European countries saying we must put a complete halt to what is happening in the Mediterranean? Is that the right call? Is it politically possible?
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christie's, at Drive Time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christie's, on GB News and GB News Radio.
Join me, Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner, Monday to Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
Who benefits from that? Not the British public.
And on Fridays, join us, Tom Harwood
and Ellie Costello from Britain's Newsroom.
That's what you get with this show. That's fantastic.
If it's happening, we're talking about it on Britain's Newsroom.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I said on Monday I thought Lampedusa could become the most important political issue within the European Union and that it had the potential to perhaps destroy it. Maybe that was strong language, but I don't believe I was wrong for a moment. Think about it. That island of 6,000 people and somewhere between 2 and 3 times the size of the population of the island have arrived in the last 10 days on boats, leading, of course, initially to a huge problem in how to look after these people, many of them not respecting any compounds they were supposed to be in, the beginnings of transportations to the Italian mainland. But the real story is this. The real story is there are political parties around Europe that are now saying, enough. We went through all of this back in 2015 and 16, and it did in some cases, like Sweden, have very severe social consequences. Even the president of Germany, Steinmeier, saying overnight, we've reached our limit. We just can't take any more. Well, Poland is a pretty key player in all of this. And they're going to have a general election next month. And interestingly, Dominik Tarczyński, MEP, was the first MEP to go and visit Lampedusa. And he joins me right now, member of the European Parliament for the Law and Justice Party. Dominic, your position on this would be just what? I mean, are Poland going to say, if your party wins the general election, right, and it looks like you're close to winning the general election, if your party wins the general election, are you saying you won't take migrants that have come in through Italy?
Of course not. We won't. What we're saying is send them back.
OK.
Simple as that. Poland is the only country in the European Union which we haven't had even one terrorist attack. We don't have stabbings, we don't have rapes, we don't have all these really dangerous behaviors from migrants, illegal migrants. So our policy is very straight, zero tolerance. We built a beautiful wall on our border with Belarus, and there's no way anyone would enter Poland. When you see the data from Eurostat, not ours, from European Union, Poland is the safest country in Europe.
That is true. That is true. Many would say that, well, OK, there have been problems of assimilation, but that in time it's going to be a success. And and here's the interesting thing. You know, you're signatories to the European Convention on Human Rights.
That's right.
You're subject to that court in Strasbourg. How is it that the European Union aren't taking action against you for saying that?
Of course they will. They started in 2015. You have to remember when they started this madness, I mean, Angela Merkel started it when she was looking for cheap labor. We said, no, we're not going to sign this quota system. And the quota system failed. The quota system does not exist anymore. Why? Because Poland and others said, Hungary...
No, you simply said no.